direction he needed. Staying low, Caleb ran hard, angling his path to get the wagon between him and the rustlers as quickly as he could. He nearly made it. The flash from the lead rider's rifle was accompanied by the crack of wood and an explosion of splinters above the sideboard of the wagon. A second shot thudded dead into the ground a few yards to Caleb's right. Immediately, with shouts and guns blazing, they were all coming hard. If Caleb had entertained even a fleeting thought that this might have been a neighborly visit, which he hadn't, the idea was shot to hell now. He raised his Winchester and fired, quickly levering and firing again. The second shot caught the leader. He jerked back off his saddle and dropped to the ground like a stone. Caleb wasn't watching. As he turned his sights on the next rider, a bullet ripped a hot line across Caleb's gut, just a few inches above his belt, spinning him back a step. Big mistake. Now he was really angry. They were not 100 yards away, close enough that he could see the moon lighting their features, and close enough that he wouldn't miss. Setting his feet, he put a bullet square in the face of the nearest man, taking off the rider's hat and half his head. That was enough to give the other 4 second thoughts. Reining in sharp, 2 swung out of their saddles and dove for cover behind a pair of boulders. The other 2 turned tail, digging in their spurs and riding hard for the pines. Shots rang out from the stone outcroppings, and the sound of bullets whizzing through the air and thudding into the ground around him sent Caleb scurrying toward the wagon. Both of the rustlers stopped firing almost simultaneously, and Caleb knew they were loading 15 more into their rifles. The man on the right seemed to be the better marksman. His bullets had been doing serious damage to the wagon. Going down on one knee between the front and back axles, Caleb slid the barrel of his rifle across the wagon's reach. Aiming for the spot on the edge of the boulder where he'd last seen the better shooter positioned, he waited. He didn't have long to wait. The gleaming barrel of the rustler's rifle appeared, immediately followed by a hatless head. Caleb squeezed the trigger of the weapon Buffalo Bill himself called the Boss. The shooter's head disappeared, and the rifle dropped into the grass beside the boulder. Before Caleb could swing his gun around, the other fellow gave up the cover of his boulder and started running for the pines, stopping only once to turn and fire around. That was his final mistake. A flash of golden fur streaked across the field, and Bear's teeth were in his shoulder even as he bowled the desperado to the ground. Managing to throw the dog off him as he staggered to his feet, the rustler was drawing his revolver from its holster when Caleb's bullet ripped into him, folding him like an old Barlow knife before he fell. Caleb called off Bear and strode quickly across the field toward the pines, loading cartridges into his Winchester as he moved. He knew the place where the other 2 entered the forest had put a deep gulch between them and Elkhorn, so unless they planned to ride their horses straight up the side of the ridge to the east, they'd box themselves in. Caleb entered the pines, listening for any sound of horse or rider. It was dark as a church here, with only a few openings where the moonlight broke through the boughs. The cool smell of pine filled his senses, and he saw Bear disappear off to the right. Since the dog was following them, he decided to track to the left. A few minutes later, his foot caught air, and he nearly went over the edge of the gulch. Caleb caught himself and peered into the blackness of the ravine. The spring melt was long over, and there was no sound of running water, and no sound of any riders that might have gone over the ledge either. No such luck, he thought. Working his way along the edge, Caleb soon heard the sound of low voices. "Gotta go back down there. Ain't no other way. I ain't heard no shots for a while." Caleb moved closer until he saw them standing with their horses in a small clearing illuminated by the blue light of the moon. "Maybe they killed the sumbitch." "Maybe they did, maybe they didn't." They froze when their horses both raised their heads in alarm. "What's that?" On the far side of the clearing, Bear crept into view, head lowered and teeth bared. Before either one could draw, Caleb stepped in behind them. "Throw 'em down." Unfortunately, some fellows never know when to fold a losing hand. One of them drew his revolver as he whirled toward the voice. Caleb's Winchester barked, dropping the man where he stood. The other swung his rifle but never got the shot off. Bear leaped, biting down on the hand holding the gunstock. Locking his vice-like jaws, the dog shook his head fiercely, eliciting a scream. Trying to yank his hand and the weapon